You are getting a live look at Westlake Okoboji, where they are expecting big crowds as summer unofficially begins this weekend. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stella Daskalakis. Matt is off tonight. While many are preparing to hit the roads or head to the airport for the first holiday weekend since COVID vaccines became readily available, the temperature doesn't feel like May. We begin tonight with Storm Team 4 Chief Meteorologist Rhonda Mars, who breaks down your weekend forecast. Ron, did I hear right? Some of Sioux Lake could see frost tomorrow? Thanks, Ron. We'll talk to you soon. This weekend is the first major holiday weekend since the COVID-19 vaccine rollout and mask restrictions were lifted. With nearly half of the country receiving at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, fewer restrictions are making way for more of a traditional Memorial Day. Beaches and state parks are getting ready for something that has been discouraged the past year, crowds. But medical experts remind Americans not to get too complacent.
We should never feel comfortable about this until we have actually crushed this outbreak.
Elsewhere, Indianapolis is moving full speed ahead with this weekend's Indy 500. The track will be at 40% capacity, which means roughly 135,000 fans will need to mask up for the race. You can watch the race Sunday right here on KTIV. Memorial Day weekend marks the beginning of summer vacations, and some Siouxlanders may be starting to plan vacations. But with the pandemic still on people's minds, some worry about getting on a plane. The alternative to traveling by air is a road trip in an RV or camper. Some dealers have seen a massive spike in sales during the pandemic. They describe the market as, quote, unreal and one of the biggest years they've had. They think there's one main reason.
People are not going overseas. People aren't traveling out of the states like they used to. So it's pushed those people into the RV market, which normally they may not have been.
Glazer says 3 to 4 campers are sold a day, and more people are buying than renting. One summer favorite will not be opening this weekend in Sioux City. Sioux City is postponing the opening of the Riverside Family Aquatic Center, citing safety due to water temperature because of this weekend's cooler forecast. It's now scheduled to open next Saturday, June 5th. The other two pools, Leif Erikson and Lewis, are slated to open on Saturday, June 12th. They say they are fortunate to be able to open all 3 pools because, like many businesses, they are short on staff.
We are a little understaffed. We're fortunate here in Sioux City. We're going to be able to open all 3 pools. I know a lot of other pools are going to be limited hours or open every other day and stuff like that, just with their hiring issues they've had. We're really lucky here that we're going to be able to open up normal hours and everything just like normal.
While the pools will not be open, if you want to brave the cooler temperatures, the 5 Sioux City splash pads should still be running from 10 to 8 tomorrow. We should also remember the real reason for the holiday weekend, and that is Memorial Day, honoring the men and women who died while serving in the U.S. military. Siouxland Freedom Park in South Sioux City has 2 big events going on this weekend. On Sunday, it is Thunder on the Missouri, a remembrance ride from Sergeant Bluff to the park. It is the 7th annual ride. On Monday, they will hold a Memorial Day ceremony at the park. It will begin at 11 a.m. If you can't make it to Siouxland Freedom Park this weekend, you can show your support with a donation as they try to complete their interpretive center. Just go to KTIV.com and click on the banner at the top of the page to find out how. There you can also watch our KTIV news special, Siouxland Freedom Park, History and Healing. Also topping news tonight, a case that we've been following for nearly 3 years. Now, finally, a sense of closure in the murder of University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
After more than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury in the Christian Bahena Rivera murder trial have reached a verdict, guilty on all counts in the July 2018 murder of University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts. The 12-member jury found Rivera guilty of murder in the first degree. They also had the option to convict Bahena Rivera of second-degree murder and manslaughter. The jury is made up of 7 men and 5 women. 9 of the jurors are white and 3 are Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish. The prosecution argued Bahena Rivera pursued Molly Tibbetts, stabbed her, and hid her body in a cornfield outside her hometown of Brooklyn, Iowa. Bahena Rivera led police to her body in the cornfield several weeks later and allegedly confessed to the crime. The prosecution says the family is pleased with the verdict.
We just spoke to the family for a few minutes afterwards. They're relieved. They're pleased with the verdict. It's just the family of Molly Tibbetts is just a great bunch, and they've been awesome to work with in this circumstance. Of course, it's always very tragic, and whenever something like this happens.
Bahena Rivera's defense says they respect the jury's decision. They also acknowledge the difficulty in arguing the case with so much evidence stacked against their client, but they say Rivera remained consistent in his version of the events.
I mean, we had a situation where a client gave a statement, and he had her DNA in the trunk, and he led him to the body. That's all pretty incriminating evidence. And from the very first day we met Mr. Bahena, the story he put forth on the stand was exactly the version of the events he told us going back to August 2018. He had never varied from that version of the events, not one detail.
During Bahena Rivera's testimony, he claimed 2 masked men were responsible for the crime, and he was an unwilling participant. The defense says that was always their client's story, and investigators cut corners to close the case. The next step is sentencing. Bahena Rivera is scheduled to be sentenced on July 15th in Montezuma, Iowa. That's near Brooklyn, Iowa, where Molly Tibbetts was killed. Bahena Rivera, who has now been convicted of first-degree murder, could now spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. At one point, the Bahena Rivera trial was scheduled to take place in Woodbury County, originally set for trial in Poweshiek County. Defense attorneys argued they couldn't get a fair and partial jury in the county. So on March 27, 2019, the trial was moved to Sioux City. But in July 2020, court documents claimed both sides would face hurdles with COVID-19 restrictions, and moving the trial would be beneficial. Eventually, the trial was moved to Scott County. I was worried about my tomato plants. I thought maybe I might have to go cover them, but we might be okay at least here.
If you want to be completely safe, not a bad thing to do, but we should be safe.
All right, thanks very much, Ron. Here's some good news for you. A zoo in Western France has welcomed a new addition to its giraffe family, which is the 2nd giraffe birth there this year. The still unnamed newborn male giraffe was born on May 8th, which followed the birth of Kano, the zoo's other baby giraffe, born in January. The zookeeper says the birth of the giraffe is good news for wildlife conservation. Giraffe numbers in the wild have decreased by about 30% in the last few years, and that's since the 1980s. According to the Giraffe Conservation Foundation, about 117,000 giraffes remain today. Coming up in this newscast, Senate Republicans have blocked the creation of a bipartisan panel to study the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And this month marks 100 years since one of the worst massacres in U.S. history. We look back at one of our country's forgotten chapters after the break. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Stella Daskalakis. Matt is on assignment. It is election eve, and votes are already being counted in Siouxland. A record number of Americans have already cast their ballots. KTIV's Claire Bradshaw joins us live with what those numbers look like in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Claire? Thank you, Claire. So when can we expect results on election night? With a large number of absentee ballots this year, it might take longer. Each of the 3 Siouxland states count their ballots differently. Tonight, we are digging deeper. In Iowa, state officials are able to start counting absentee ballots early, but some ballots might continue to trickle in after Election Day. Iowa law requires officials to count mail-in ballots that arrive by November 9th as long as they're postmarked by today. In Nebraska, large counties like Douglas and Dodge started counting absentee and early votes this afternoon. Tomorrow, after the polls close, all other counties will start counting them. In Nebraska, early ballots get counted first. South Dakota absentee ballots are merged with other votes, so all ballots should be counted at the same time. County auditors have to wait until Election Day to process ballots, but the South Dakota Secretary of State is hopeful all results will be totaled on election night. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts is also reminding voters in the state who still have an absentee ballot. If they mail it today, it will not be counted toward the general election. More than 550,000 residents have requested absentee ballots in the state. For those who will not be voting in person, mailed and in-person early voting ballots must be received by your county's election office by the close of polls tomorrow. That means they must be received by 8 p.m. Central Time or 7 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesday.
So the post office will not have time to be able to deliver it now. So you're going to have to go hand deliver it into your election office or your wherever your county has to be able to collect those ballots.
Governor Ricketts is also reminding people to be patient tomorrow when they are at the polls. For the first time in nearly 20 years, someone other than Steve King will represent Northwest Iowa in Congress. The 9-term Republican congressman lost his party's June primary to State Senator Randy Feenstra of Hull. Feenstra will challenge the Democrat who nearly beat King 2 years ago, J.D. Scholten. King only beat Scholten by 3.3 percentage points in a district where Republicans hold a 77,000 voter lead among active registered voters. 6 years ago, Joni Ernst became the first woman Iowa voters sent to Congress. To earn another term in the U.S. Senate, she'll have to beat Democrat Teresa Greenfield. Republicans hold a slim 3-seat majority in the Senate, and the outcome of the Ernst-Greenfield race could affect the balance of power in the Senate. Nebraska voters will decide the future of casino gambling in their state on Election Day. Initiative 429 would add a new section to the state constitution to exempt laws authorizing gambling at licensed racetracks from the state's constitutional prohibition on gambling. Initiative 430 would authorize and regulate gambling at licensed racetracks. And Initiative 431 would impose an annual tax of 20% on gross gambling revenue of licensed gaming operators. But without the approval of Initiative 429, Initiatives 430 and 431 would not take effect. Marijuana may become legal in the state of South Dakota soon. A medical marijuana initiative is on the ballot on Election Day. South Dakota voters will see Amendment A and Measure 26 on the ballot. Amendment A is an amendment to the South Dakota Constitution to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana. Measure 26 is an initiated measure to legalize marijuana for medical use. Measure 26 would establish a medical marijuana program in South Dakota for people who have a debilitating medical condition. With just hours to go, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are making their final pitch to voters in critical swing states. Joe Biden is in the Rust Belt talking to voters in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is on a marathon swing through North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. One of the states we'll be watching very closely on Election Day is Pennsylvania. The Keystone State will be an important win for both campaigns, and today, Biden and Trump and their running mates are all making their closing arguments to Pennsylvanians. The state could be the tipping point for who gets the magic number of 270 electoral votes. A high number of mail-in and absentee votes are expected in Pennsylvania, so we may not know the winner there right away. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden began his election eve campaign day in Cleveland, Ohio. After taking to the stage before a car-bound crowd, the Democratic presidential candidate hit the campaign highlights and responded to new comments from President Donald Trump. He told voters the power to change is in their hands and there isn't anything that's going to stop them from voting.